following podcast contains spoilers and words like and We watch TV. We watch TV. Hello everybody and welcome back to another gripping edition of We Watched a Thing. This week I am lucky enough to be blessed with true podcasting royalty. It is Sean Carney from the Sanspants Network, currently one of the hosts of Scaredy Boys and How Good's Footy. How you doing, mate?
Really good, mate. Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Hey.
We've been wanting to do this for a while. I think we set this one up a long way out. We looked at that release date and let's hit it.
I think it was back in August, and there's an older movie that I know at some point we're both keen to get to. But when I
was thinking about that today, actually. Oh, classic.
Save that for another time. But when I threw new releases for you, you jumped at this one, Nightmare Alley.
Yes.
I know that you are a Guillermo fan. Not long ago on Scaredy Boys, you did Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, and we've recently, there'll be one coming soon, that we did The Devil's Backbone as well recently, which is a fantastic film. Yeah. Have you seen that one?
I haven't yet.
Oh, no. It's a classic. Like, that one came out back in 2001, so it's early Del Toro, but it shocked me how he's a master already. And I'm like, man, how do you do it? He's a jet.
So we are, of course, talking about Nightmare Alley, a 2021 American neo-noir psychological thriller, directed, as we said, of course, by Guillermo del Toro and written by Del Toro and Kim Morgan, based on the 1946 novel of the same name by William Lindsay Gresham. This is the second feature film adaptation of the novel, and it stars Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett, Toni Collette, Willem Dafoe, Richard Jenkins, Rooney Mara, Ron Perlman, Mary Steenburgen, and David Strathairn. And what is it about, Carney?
This is a great question. I wrote down a little blurb I saw for this because I find it quite interesting. So, an ambitious Carney with a talent for manipulating people with a few well-chosen words hooks up with a female psychiatrist who is even more dangerous than he is. And why I find that fascinating is because that doesn't really happen until two-thirds of the way through the movie.
Yeah. I mean, jumping straight into it, this is definitely this is really a movie in two halves.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, what the story you describe there, as you say, happens well over halfway into the film.
Yeah. And
before that, it's very kind of unstructured and loose, kind of a character study.
So I saw this with Tom and Damo, who I do the Scaredy Boys podcast with, and Damo was saying afterwards, he said it might be like the hardest midpoint he's ever seen in a movie, where it's just smash, and then 2 years later, and he's, Stan is an established medium or whatever the hell, whatever his job is, swindling wealthy people. But it's part of me feels quite sad. It's such a weird movie. So the second half of it, I find more interesting. I think that's obviously when the plot kicks in more and things start to happen. However, I love the first half because that feels like a Del Toro movie where he really gets behind the carnival aspect and all the all the freaks and geeks of the place, and the design the look of the film is better in the first half.
Yep. This is going to be interesting then, because I obviously agree with you that the second half is really where the story happens. The first half doesn't have that, but I much preferred the first half of this film.
Oh, yeah. I think I'm with you because I think I wanted the whole thing to be at the carnival.
Yeah, same. Yeah, same.
I just think the second half is where the film probably gets better because the first half is kind of aimless. It sort of wanders around a bit. Yeah. Then it settles into what it is. And what it is doesn't grab me as much as most Del Toro movies, but what grabbed me was the design and the look and the characters of the first half. Give me more of that. Give me a whole film of that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the production design in this film is stunning. And this is one of those films, there's been a lot this year actually, that before they came out had a lot of Oscar buzz, and then as soon as they got released, that all kind of died. And that happened with this film. And in some ways, I'm saddened by that because I do think this film has a lot of good in it. Like the cinematography, the direction, the production design is truly stunning. This is easily the best designed film I've seen this year.
Yeah.
But sadly for me, I think outside of that, that's kind of where the good ends. I think the cast is really great, but I think the story is I don't know. I mean, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Have you seen the 1947 film?
No, I haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
I haven't.
It's not one that I've actually heard of before this film came about. I read today that it kind of came and went. It was a bit of a bomb when it came out. I think the lead actor in it, he was the lead actor. He's famous for Zorro, I think, Mask of Zorro.
Yep.
But this film grew a bit of a cult following, I think, in the 2000s and onwards. And Del Toro even wanted to do this in like the mid-90s, I think. I think he'd done Kronos, which either his first film or one of his first, and he like very arrogantly was like to the studio, would you like to give me the money to do Nightmare Alley? And they were like, your first film hasn't even come out yet. What do you want? So yeah, he kind of had to wait, and he said that when he did The Shape of Water and he won the Oscar and it did well at the box office, and that was with whatever company he's doing Nightmare Alley with, I can't remember, it was like Fox Searchlight or whatever.
Yep.
He said once that was a success, he knew I can go to them now and ask, can I do Nightmare Alley?
Interesting.
Please? So, yeah.
I was really surprised because I associate Del Toro with such originality. You know, like you look at films like The Shape of Water and Pan's Labyrinth, like, yes, they're fairy tales, but they're very creative and inventive and very, as you say, kind of Del Toro.
Yeah.
And this movie being an adaptation doesn't really have that feel.
No.
So I hadn't seen the 47 film and I haven't read the book, but after I watched the movie, my initial thought was, well, he must have changed a lot of this, you know, like especially the way it ends and everything. I was like, there's no way this is a book from 46.
Well,
I was wrong. This is almost a straight adaptation from what I can tell.
Yeah, I've heard that it's one of the saddest books you'll ever read.
Yeah.
Which is the feeling you get when the movie ends.
Well, like, definitely that tracks.
Because it's Del Toro. He does a lot of things similar throughout his films, and he does them quite well. But one thing he generally does have is a bit of hope. He always believes in a little bit of hope in the world, a little bit of good in the world, even in like dark places and all that sort of thing.
Definitely, yeah.
This film did not do that.
It's true. Like, yeah. You look at the end of Pan's Labyrinth, and yes, that is a very grim ending, even grimmer than this one, arguably. And yet, I know what you mean. There is, because there's such a fairy tale feeling to that film, there is a real sense of hope there, which this ends in complete despair. The ending to this is, and it's extremely predictable, like, which is what I didn't love about the back half. Once we get into the story, I found the story very predictable. Yeah. But it's still a gut punch when you get there to that final moment.
Yeah, because so I came out of it and my friend said to me, when did you pick that was going to happen to him? And I was like, actually quite late. I think I just got like...
Really?
Yeah, I think story-wise I disengaged from this, but I was just sort of eating up the visual aspects of it still. Yep. So I was kind of like sitting there for most of this film going, geez, this hurts my heart because it's Del Toro, but I'm probably going to drop 2 stars on this movie. It's just hasn't really lived up to any of the hype for me. And then that ending's probably worth a star. Like that is both the decision to do it, the direction of it, the way they framed it, and the fucking performance. Like Bradley Cooper. Yeah. If he is going to get nominated for an Oscar, unlikely, probably it's a pretty stacked field, but it will be 100% because of that scene. It's haunting.
I agree. I've never been a huge Bradley Cooper fan, but this performance was insanely good from start to finish, I think. And that final moment, like you say, that is an Oscar-worthy moment.
I think that his performance maybe started a bit slow, but it's weird. You don't often see an actor build and build and build and build. Like I thought he built his way into the performance. So the whole way through, he just kept getting better and better, even if the story was maybe going the opposite way. Bradley Cooper was elevating until, I mean, I can't actually get over that final scene. It reminds me of, have you seen Captain Phillips?
No, I haven't. No.
So there's a scene, it's either the final scene or near the end with Tom Hanks, and like I won't say much. I'll just say that it's like some of the greatest acting I think I've ever seen. And the rest of the movie, it's fine. And he's good. He's Tom Hanks in it. You know, he's solid. But you have that one scene where you're like, holy shit, just give him the Oscar for that like 5-minute scene.
Yeah.
Crazy. Having said that, Bradley Cooper, I think he's miscast.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. And I'll tell you why. Because I reckon that character needs to be younger. Like, this is the kind of quintessential role where you'd have a kid in their like 20s who's like trying to build their way up in the world, and there's been a few hard knocks, and eventually they learn the tricks of the trade from the other people at the carnival, and then they go out in the world and things are good for a while and then things are bad for a while. Bradley Cooper is nearly 50 years old. I think he's 47.
Oh, wow. Okay, that makes me feel really bad about myself. He's like a good 15 years older than me and looks like that, and here I am. But wow, okay, yeah.
But like, I look at Bradley Cooper and I go, I think you could probably pass for 40. Like if this movie's telling me you're 40 years old, great. But him being a 40-year-old at the start of the film still is too old for that character, especially when you got like Willem Dafoe calling him young buck, calling him kid.
Well,
and Toni Collette sort of is like, you got the whole world ahead of you sort of thing. It's a very young role. And I'd even stretch that to Rooney Mara, who I think she's like mid to late 30s as well. I think she's too old for that role as well.
Yeah, right. I agree. It's funny. It didn't strike me at the time. I think because I thought his performance was so good. But you're exactly right. There's a lot of like, hey kid talk thrown around. Like,
he's too
that
old.
Definitely is a role for a 20-year-old man.
Oh, for sure. Because then you see them, you can start, you got to have a bit of hope. Things have got to go well before they go bad. And they do in this movie, but it's harder to sort of buy into because he's already coming at it from, when we meet him, he's already world weary. He's already a quiet, quiet sort of broken guy who's desperate for a job, desperate to do anything. He'll do anything. He'll sleep on the ground. So I don't know, that aspect of the story, make him younger.
And you do really get that sense from him, like narratively. I actually really like the first 5 minutes. He doesn't say a word. I spent the first 5 minutes of this film thinking his character might be mute.
Yeah, because I don't think he talks in the trailer.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I should talk about the trailers.
See, I haven't seen the trailer because I don't know if you know this about me, but I have not watched a trailer in, God, it must be 7 or 8 years now. I see them at the cinemas.
Brilliant.
But that is the only time I see them, is if I happen to see them. I've had this vow to not watch them.
I'm so happy for you. And I assume this came about because trailers basically reached a point where they tell you the entire film. I hate it so much.
Bad, yeah.
Can I tell you the example that always comes to mind? And it's The Dark Knight Rises. It's the fact that they show Bane blow up the football stadium.
You see,
can you imagine if you saw that for the first time in a cinema? It would have blown your mind. But I saw it in a trailer because I watched the trailer 30 times before I watched the movie.
It's ridiculous.
Oh, that's great. So I try and avoid trailers. Occasionally I'll see one, but I didn't see the Nightmare Alley ones.
Okay, yeah.
And so this is the Del Toro thing. When I think of him, I think of horror. And the fact that it also had nightmare in the title, I was like, I don't know much about this film, but I think I'm going in for a little bit of a Del Toro spooky time.
I thought the same thing, actually, yeah.
And it's not a horror film at all. So we went into it. Yeah, I watched it with the guys from the Scaredy Boys because we were going to do an episode for our show because it's a horror film. And then we're like, we can't do it. It's not a horror film.
Yeah, yeah.
So the guys told me, watch the trailer. So I watched the first trailer today, and I shit you not, you could watch that trailer and come away thinking, is Bradley Cooper going to turn into a werewolf in this movie? I'm not even kidding. The trailer is Willem Dafoe doing like that speech he does when everyone's circled around to look at the freak.
At the geek,
the geek. Is he man? Is he beast? All this. And then as he's doing that, it's just like overlaid shots. Bradley Cooper not talking, but it's just him progressively getting worse, and then there's him bleeding and him scraping blood on the wall, and the music's like dun dun dun, and then there's that shot, when he's running in between the train carriages towards the end. Yeah, because he's being shot, he's sort of running like in this weird sort of way, which if you come at that with no context and you can't see the blood because you can't get the silhouette, he looks like a werewolf. It looks like he's running like a werewolf. So a lot of people saw the trailer and went, oh, cool, it's a horror movie, and maybe he's a monster. Yeah, it's not a monster movie.
No, not at all. It's my wife and I saw this for date night, and she hadn't seen the trailer either, so neither of us knew anything about this. And very early on, even though it's not a horror, Del Toro does inject a lot of atmosphere into the film.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that first scene with the geek, which happens very early on, where we were both, like, she looked at me when he bit into that chicken's neck, and she was like, what the fuck did you drag me to? And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what this film's about. But it really is not a horror at all. It's one of those weird things, even, Wikipedia and IMDb describe it as a neo-noir psychological film, which I guess to some extent it is, but I think, to be honest, I'd call this a straight drama. I think, to me, what works best about this film is the character study of it and seeing his progression, which is why the carnival stuff works. Because, as you say, it's a really hard cut. and it's not just the 2 years later thing. The tone and everything shifts at the halfway point.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing that makes that work is seeing his progression.
Yep. I would have made the jump longer than 2 years.
Yeah, me too, actually. I don't think 2 years is enough time for what happens in between and what we see. Yeah.
I agree. And I also don't think it's enough time for them to have built up that sort of lavish lifestyle. They're basically leaving the carnival with nothing in presumably a truck that they've borrowed with no real money to their name. Like, actually, Bradley Cooper's character, the arrogance of him is actually fantastic because he pretty much doesn't even do his show at the carnival. He just tricks the guy that Jim Beaver's playing, the police chief or whatever. He just tricks him, and then he's like, "You see me? I'm ready. Let's get out of here." And it's like, you gotta do the groundwork, man.
Yeah, it's true. And when he first has that discussion with Rooney Mara about, this is an act that could be bigger, I thought he was talking about her electrocution act. I didn't realize he was talking about himself. He's just an arrogant.
But even like he sells it to her like, I've got an idea for a 2-person act, and then it cuts to the great Stanton or whatever his name is. So it's just it's him, and she's just there to support and help, and it's just it sucks. I'm so happy that she lived through this movie. She's she's like one of the only like genuinely good people.
Yeah, and that actually was the one thing I found unpredictable. When they do embark on their eventual kind of scam and she gets involved, I knew that it was going to go south, but I did think that she was going to die in that whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they were going to do the old she dies to teach him a lesson thing, which I was so ready to hate, but I'm glad that she was basically like, fuck off, and just left. Yeah. Even at the end, I thought he might wind his way back to her and she could see the decrepit thing that he's become, but like, nah, it's just, I don't know, hopefully she's moved on to something better.
Yeah, so apparently, even though the original book ends this same way, the 1947 film did turn that ending around where she's at the same carnival that he eventually becomes a geek at. And, and they kind of rekindle and, just, it was the 40s. You had to have a happy ending.
Yeah, okay. I've got a bit of an issue with Cate Blanchett, and I think I come at this in a biased way because I've never really been a fan of hers.
Oh, fuck yes! Oh my God, you're the other person.
Okay, great.
I get ragged on all the time for not loving Cate Blanchett.
I think she's a great actor.
Yep.
But I don't even really know why, but I've never really watched her in something and liked her. And granted, she'll often play not a very likable character from the things I'm thinking of, but even if she was playing a likable character, I would just be like, nah. And in this, I've seen people praise her performance, and I totally understand it. But for me, she's like her and Cooper are in two different films. He's trying to play it film noir, sly sort of. I don't know. She's ratcheted it up to like volume 20. She's gone way too hard at it. I think.
She's full Bond villain in this film.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she's basically her in Indiana Jones. She's hamming it up to that extent, and it's like. It's cool. We all know you can do that, but just like bring it back a bit because there's no part of this movie where you ever go, can we trust her? Because you just can't. You're like, straight away, you're like, she's going to rip him off and he's an idiot.
See, this has always been my problem with Cate Blanchett is that I feel that she often overplays it. Even Lord of the Rings, which let's face it, it's a high fantasy, it's a hammy film. I still feel like she is 10 above everyone else in the film.
I rewatched that recently and she just goes off the charts.
Exactly, instantly. And it kind of ruins it for me. And, I've liked her now and then. I'm actually a big fan of The Gift. I don't know if you've seen that, kind of thriller from the 90s, But I think for the most part, she really hams things up. And I agree with you. I think she does in this film as well.
Yeah.
I think most of the cast is pretty solid, though. Where are you on Toni Collette?
Oh, I think she's good. I'm a fan of Collette. I'm a coward, so I refuse to watch Hereditary. So I think I'm robbing. I think I'm robbing myself.
You might get to it this year, though.
Over my dead body. I think I'm robbing myself of what I've heard is one of her best performances. I think she's great, but they don't really do enough with her.
It's exactly what I was going to say. I think she is the only... we lose almost all the carnival folk at that halfway turn, and she's the only one that I'm really like, wow, that's a loss. We're underusing Toni Collette in this film.
She should have been a much bigger factor. And even then when they come to visit, her and Ron Perlman and the other guy come and visit them in the city, and it's like she still doesn't really do anything. I think she just flips some tarot cards. And it's just like, like what? Like I liked her, was it her husband, David Strathairn's character?
Yeah.
He was quite good too. And I wish that they'd actually, I know that we saw their little 2-person act when they were demonstrating it to Bradley Cooper. But I kind of would have liked to have seen it on stage, seen their like sort of low rent version of it, just to flesh that out a bit more. I think they in that first half he spent too long on certain things when he should have spent a bit more time with Toni Collette.
I agree. That's one of the things for me. This is a very long film, and I really felt the length of it, like big time. So we went to a 7:30 session, and when you go to a 7:30 session, you don't expect to be walking out of there at 10:30 at night, but we did.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, okay, that was long.
We went to we went to a 12:40, and then I got out of it. I'm like, well, my whole day's gone. What the hell?
Yeah. And I agree with you. The part of the problem is that for as long as it is, I feel like the wrong things are spent the amount of time on. There's a lot of stuff that's underfleshed in the film. Like Toni Collette and her relationship with Pete even is never fully just given a proper establishment. Like, I think we're meant to assume that they're husband and wife, but he's so much older than her that it's a bit strange. Even Pete's alcoholism, I don't think is fully established. There's a couple of hints that he has a bit of a problem, but not to the extent that, we then see him die from. Yeah,
that was too abrupt, I think. You kind of hint at the problem, and it doesn't even seem like a massive problem at that point. It's just sort of, that's just who he is. Yeah,
exactly. But he seems like a fully together dude. I mean, there's the one scene where he kind of slips up during the act, but apart from that, we don't get a lot. And I really had a bit of an issue with Bradley Cooper's turn to alcoholism as well.
That annoyed me. Yep.
It's very, very abrupt, and I still don't understand the motivation for it. Like, was that him just trying to show up Cate Blanchett's character, or
there's
I just
such a
didn't
weird
really understand
dynamic.
The turn.
I think they get to a point where they're just trying to have power over the other one. But if that's his idea of gaining power over her by drinking, he's a fucking idiot, because him doing that, he loses all of his power. She's goaded him into doing that. I don't have a problem with him drinking, but I want it to be after this. I want it to be at the bit at the end when he's sitting around in sort of that hobo sort of village with those guys.
That's
then
exactly right.
Finally break down and have a drink and give away your father's watch and all of that. Don't just sit there and have a drink. My God, he makes some poor decisions. Yeah. Basically, when we get that hard midpoint, every decision he makes after that is wrong.
Yeah, and any likability that they've built up with that character just instantly dissolves as well. Like, it's not that he's ever... It's funny, he's the protagonist, but he's not a great guy. No. But you still kind of like him at the carnival. Like, he shows some compassion for the geek, for example. And, but then in that second half, he is such a raging
yeah, because like, Rooney Mara's her character. She's another one who probably doesn't get enough to do. She gets a decent amount. She has a couple of nice beats, but like not enough to do. But she's nice, and so for the audience, it's like if anyone's rude to her, you give him the old Ron Perlman fucking punch in the face. For him to just so abruptly be an arsehole, it's just kind of shit. I wanted to if you're going to have a 2.5 hour movie, spend more time slowly showing Bradley Cooper sort of come apart at the seams.
Yeah, because that really is... I mean, that's what this story is. This story is a rags to riches to rags story. Yeah. It's honestly, it's a dramatic version of Steve Martin's The Jerk. It's you see a poor guy kind of build himself up and then break himself down, but the turns are all so abrupt that you really miss the transitions there, and it kind of... It's a bit sad to say this about a Del Toro film, but you come away from it feeling a little bit pointless. Like, what was the journey for? And I think you can pull out certain themes and stuff, but it still overall doesn't feel like a worthwhile journey to me anyway.
I agree with you. I think, like, for a 2.5 hour film, for basically every turning point to be so abrupt, it's like something's gone wrong in the writing phase. Yeah. And this is very much a master director directing the shit out of a kind of mediocre script.
Yeah.
Like, big time. Like, if they win any Oscars, it'll be like the production design side of things.
Yeah. Look, and honestly, though, I don't think we've said enough, to be fair, about how good the direction of this film is. Like, I think this is a beautiful looking film.
Yep.
Like, I think the composition of every shot is stunning, especially the production design of that carnival. The way that he uses those lights in the background and everything are just gorgeous.
This is where it's like, I don't know how faithful we need to be to adaptations. Yeah, this is purely selfishly, but I just wanted the whole film. I wanted a 2-hour film, and I wanted the whole thing to be at the carnival. And if you want to bring Cate Blanchett's psychiatrist into it, she's just a traveling person who comes to the carnival.
I could see that,
you know, and hooks up with him, and then sees an advantage to take down some people. Because I think the implication in this film, we haven't talked about Richard Jenkins yet, and I want to because he's fantastic.
Yeah,
like
sure.
And he comes in too late. They've probably robbed him of an Oscar nomination because maybe he just doesn't have quite enough to do. But geez, he's scary. He's that kind of actor who, there's another film I was watching, I think it was Bone Tomahawk, where it took me 15 minutes and then I went, holy shit, that's Rich Jenkins.
Yeah.
Like, kind of sinks into characters. He's fantastic.
He does, yeah.
But I can't even remember the point I was trying to make about Richard Jenkins. I got mesmerized by his talent and I've just absolutely lost my thread. The film, it goes for too long. I'm a big fan of a tight 90-minute film. I know Del Toro is never going to sort of play in that field, but this should have been 2 hours, and I would have loved if it was the carnival, and I would have loved for them to just, because you're right, when it's so abrupt in the middle, you just suddenly lose Ron Perlman, you lose Toni Collette, you lose everyone you've kind of invested in, and then the thing that they replace it with is just Stan being just a massive dick. And it's like, I like what you said before about the audience does kind of like him, but I think that's purely Bradley Cooper's charisma, because when we are introduced to this guy, he's burying a body under a house and then setting it on fire. And you're like, well, what the hell? What is this guy doing?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. And that's where I think, you spoke about him being miscast, and I think on the age front I agree, but you definitely need someone with that kind of charisma to play this role, because otherwise there's just nothing there. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've circled back to I remember what I was trying to say
Richard
before.
Jenkins,
No, it was to do with Cate Blanchett. I think the implication is that Richard Jenkins is the one who gave her the scar.
Interesting. Okay, I did not pick that up.
That's what we were talking about when we got out of the film. I think Tom was saying that. He was saying, because he came and saw her as a patient. And then you get his whole speech about how he's hurt women, and he's been doing it for ages, and I don't know why I do it, and I'm doing this. I think he did hurt her, and her long con was basically get the money off this idiot, but also get revenge on that old prick who hurt me.
I like that better, and to be honest, I wish that had been more explicit, because I think that makes her motivations so much clearer. Because when we got that turn for her being a villain, I was like, is this just because Bradley Cooper was kind of a dick to her when they first met? And I'm all for subtlety, but I wish that had been more explicit, if that's the case, for sure.
They did not make her turn clear. Like they signposted it in that it was definitely going to happen just because of the way she's playing the character. Like you knew for sure that he was going to get ripped off by her. But I wish that this is where the timing of the film, the structuring of it's a bit off. I wish they'd brought Cate Blanchett in earlier, because I kind of like her thing of like, oh, I can use this guy. He thinks he's got one over me, but I'm actually pulling his strings. She should have had a long list of people who have wronged her in this town. Yes. She sends this guy to go and fuck with them. Like that would have been cool.
Here we go, getting the old movie maintenance out.
Because you got that cool bit with, I think is it Mary Steenburgen's character where she kills her husband and shoots herself.
Was a great scene.
How great was that? So then Stan's only seen him and Richard Jenkins' guy. Imagine if he's gone, she's set him off around all these other old dickheads in the town, and she's just wiping people out, taking money. That would have been cooler, I think, than her just sort of, I don't know, being a dodgy psychiatrist.
That would have been very cool, because I do think what the movie's really missing is like a true antagonist and a true villain. Like, for what this film is, for a neo-noir rather than just a character study, I mean, Bradley Cooper is arguably both the protagonist and the antagonist of this film, which is fine if that's what it is. But then when you throw Cate Blanchett in as well as like, oh, look at this, I was pulling the strings the whole time. Yeah. It really sucked me out of that final act.
Well, she's your classic sort of femme fatale, I guess. And I agree with you that Cooper is kind of playing both. But I think you only get away with that if you do it effectively, and they didn't really do it effectively. And then Richard Jenkins comes into things, and he turns out to be a very disgusting, sinister man. But you don't find that out until too late.
That's exactly. I was just going to say that. I could have done with finding that out earlier, because you find that out in his final scene.
Yeah.
It's literally, it must be less than 2 minutes before he meets his end that he admits to all he's done. And that's kind of the end of it.
And you could have done it in a clearer way where we, the audience, know Richard Jenkins' true nature, but Bradley Cooper doesn't, and just thinks he's a bit of a wealthy guy. So the tension is kind of sky high. It's that whole, bomb under the table thing, but the characters don't know about it, but the audience do. Give us a bit more tension, because this movie, weirdly for Del Toro, the atmosphere was tense at the start.
Yep.
But then the air kind of went out of the balloon the longer the film went.
I had the exact same issue. I said that to my wife when we were leaving. The problem was, even though the first half arguably really had no story other than just developing Bradley Cooper, the second half with the story completely lost the tension, because where the narrative was going was so predictable. Like in that scene, I knew that, Richard Jenkins was going to discover that it was a scam. Like, we all knew that was coming. So there's no tension in those moments when it should be the most tense moment of the film. That scene where Molly is kind of risking her life as well, you should really care in those moments. And I kind of just didn't.
Which is interesting, because are you the same as I in that you quite liked the Molly character, and you don't I don't want anything bad to happen to her, but I didn't really feel tension in that moment because the movie let the air out.
Yep, she's the most likable character in the film, 100%. Her and Toni Collette, and for some crazy reason, Ron Perlman was my MVP in this film. I thought that what he was doing with the small character he had was spot on for me, and I thought that he was great.
I agree, and I wonder if it's because he was one of the few characters who had any real humanity, because his drive... When you meet him, you think, I reckon this guy's just trying to get money off everybody and be the boss. Not at all. His motivation is, I was friends with your father, and I promised him I wouldn't let anything bad happen to you. And you go, he's just a big old sweetheart. Yeah, and he's got sore knees because he's the strongest man, and he was cool.
And I think that actually is my problem overall. Like, narratively, the story is about Bradley Cooper's character, Stan, being a con man and his growth into that. And I didn't buy that from the start, because he actually does seem to have too much humanity in him. He really seems to care for Pete, for example, Toni Collette's partner.
Yep.
And his turn to just being a complete dick in that second half just did not track for me with the character that had been established so far.
Yeah, the way he turns out in that second half, in the first half, you'd need to have, that scene where Pete falls asleep and Stan's looking through his book of tricks.
Yeah.
But it's not in there's no malice. There's no malice in it. He's just genuinely just curious. Whereas, if you want to have him turn into the massive dick, maybe have it his plan is, I'm going to steal that book, or I'm going to fuel this guy up with liquor to the point where he can't remember anything, and I'm going to steal all his secrets. But he doesn't have that malevolent side either.
Exactly. So that, as far as I can tell, seems to be the difference that Del Toro has made, which is something I don't quite understand, is that in the novel and in the 47 adaptation, it is more explicit that he purposefully kills Pete to take that book and so I actually think I like that more, because that establishes the character, whereas here I don't think that's ever even hinted at.
I like that too. It's stronger on the character, and he's sort of making an active choice rather than just being Pete died. Oh, yeah, take that book. I would even when Pete dies, I would like his first thing be to break into the house and try and steal it quickly and get out of town. And maybe Toni Collette finds him and gives a blessing or whatever. So fine, you just take it. But there's disappointment. There's none of that. Yeah. It's kind of just he gets punched by Ron Perlman, and then the next second they're jumping in the truck and it's happy days. Yeah. So it's not. But everything's a little bit too abrupt. Nothing really leaned in. I'm just so shocked that a 2.5 hour movie just if you're going to take the extra time, get the script right, get everything flowing right. Strange. An odd movie.
Yeah.
I just wanted to sort of pick your brain just from a visual effects point of view.
Yep.
About, did anything stand out for you? Because I saw some comments online today where people were just kind of Did this get nominated for anything special effects wise? Because some people were like, "Oh, what effects?" And I'm kind of like, "Well, there were obviously effects in there, and I'm sure like often the good ones are invisible, right? Like they don't scream in your face."
That is the thing that I think most people don't realize when you talk about visual effects. And I had this discussion recently with Paul from The Countdown when we were talking about Mad Max Fury Road, where a lot of people talk about how amazing those practical effects are, and they are. But people forget that there are 2,500 visual effects shots in that film.
Yeah.
Because most of it, particularly, and in this film, my guess is that majority of it is background extensions and background plates. So the carnival, for example, I'm sure that a lot of that was practical set that was built, but there was for sure extensions going on there with visual effects.
Yep.
The production design of that funhouse, for example, which was stunning and such a beautiful sequence of the film that really built up tension and atmosphere.
Yeah.
I know that, I mean, you can tell that at least half of that was visual effects.
Yeah, okay.
But that's where I think this film is beautiful. And I said the same thing about Shape of Water. I think when you can blend those cinematography and visual effects elements together, that's when you've nailed the look of a film.
So the cinematographer for this was the same as Shape of Water, which I just naturally assumed had won the Oscar for cinematography.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and I was like, what?
Design, but not, Yeah,
I was like, how did this guy not win for Shape of Water? It was beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I looked and I'm like, Deakins won for Blade Runner.
Of course, yeah. Which is a beautiful... and that is another one where the visual effects are just blended so beautifully, but more obvious because of what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it's a film like this, it's really funny. I beg everybody to go look at a visual effects reel for Ugly Betty.
Okay.
You would never think a show like that, but that show was virtually entirely shot on green screen at points.
Really?
Yeah. The Great Gatsby is another one. That entire mansion was fake. I actually did some work at Animal Logic, the company that did the visual effects for that, which is on all their reels, because even though most people don't think of it, they basically only built the doorway as a physical set. Then everything else is just set extension and green screen. And that's where I think people forget where visual effects has gone these days. It's not all big monsters and creatures. 90% of it is sets, because it's so much cheaper to do that on the computer than to build a massive set.
In your opinion, is that reflected when you see things like the Academy Awards, the nominations for best effects?
I think it is more and more. I feel like Black Swan was nominated for visual effects a couple of years ago. Yeah. And that's another one where there's a lot of like set cleanup and everything done, like for those dance sequences and stuff. I think more and more that is definitely being recognized.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I think it's one of those things that, the average person going to the movies still doesn't, like you hear so much talk about how bad CGI looks. And I think most people who say that don't realize how much they're seeing is CGI. Because, it only looks bad when it's so outlandish and obvious. But the majority of stuff you see that's just, you wouldn't expect it's CGI. That's where it's really well done.
So a shot in Nightmare Alley, there's one I love, and it's like just a massive wide shot of the carnival. And of the Ferris wheel, I think, and then there's just lightning in the background. These are visual effects, yeah?
Absolutely, the visual effects. My bet would be that was not a real Ferris wheel either.
Yeah, so they've added that, so
that would be
all layered. They layer everything, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
that's sick.
Yeah, it's beautiful work. Like when you see a compositing reel of like the number of layers that go into something, you're like, wow, that's true art.
This fascinates me. I want to know if you could tell. So when Bradley Cooper lights his house on fire and there's that shot of him walking out and the whole thing's going up in flames, how much of that is practical flame and how much is visual effect, do you think, from looking at it?
I wouldn't be able to tell, actually. Yeah. And that's when you know it's really good.
Yeah, cool. Because I would imagine it's too much flame. Like
it's way too much. Yeah,
like
it's definitely
OH&S, you just couldn't do it. So I imagine maybe I wonder if any of it's real. I assume maybe a little bit in the background, and then they just sort of fill it up. Yeah,
maybe. It's really funny when you hear stories from sets and stuff where, and then it makes you think even more when things like the Alec Baldwin thing happen, and it's like, how did that happen? You hear stories from sets where it's like they need to have a safety meeting because they're going to light a candle on set, and it's like, okay, we're going to light a candle. This is a real flame. Nobody touch the candle. Like it's
that's
pretty
great.
crazy. Yeah,
awesome.
But no, I thought this was a a truly beautiful looking film. And while we're on that flame, is there anything cooler than flame reversed? Did you notice that those shots?
Yeah. That was awesome.
It's just a really cool look, I think.
They did it I think 3 or 4 times, and every time I'm like, yeah, cool. I'm here for this. This stuff's good. Yeah. He'll never make a boring movie, I think, Del Toro.
I mean, that's true. Given how long this film was and how much I, at times, didn't care about the narrative, I was never bored, which is, I mean, that's tough to say about a 2.5 hour film.
Yeah, I think this script in the hands of a different filmmaker might have just been a bit shit. But in his hands, he's created something that is, there are big chunks of it that are quite fascinating. Yeah. So I tip my hat to him.
I mean, we spoke a little bit earlier about how this has kind of fallen out of the conversation. If you had to pick this for any Oscar nominations this year, what do you think it might have a shot at?
I'd throw it up for like cinematography, for the production design aspects of it. I actually quite liked the score, and I heard today
I loved the score as well.
That I need to look into this to confirm if this is right. The composer knocked it out in a couple of days.
That's fascinating.
There was because of COVID or something. So there's that famous composer, I think his name's Alexandre Desplat.
Desplat, I know that he was supposed to do it and then he was replaced. I didn't realize it was that quickly though.
Yeah, so because of COVID, I think Del Toro had to be in the same room as him sort of thing, because that's his process. And because they couldn't get that to work, they brought in this other guy whose name I can't recall.
Nathan Johnson.
Yeah, and it apparently knocked it out in a few days or something like that.
That amazes me because I loved the score for this film.
It's
and I
great.
actually, until I looked it up afterwards, I thought it was Desplat.
That's the thing. I wonder if he came in and went, well, that's what you wanted, so I'm going to try and do a thing in his sort of style.
Yeah, because Desplat obviously did the score for Shape of Water and from memory won for score, or at least was nominated.
I think so, yeah.
But yeah, I thought the score for this was stunning. It was beautiful.
So yeah, maybe even the score, but that might be the first time a score gets nominated for a few days' work or something. But yeah, no, that guy did a great job. Basically, any of the production design, the art direction sort of stuff, I think. Bradley Cooper's still in the conversation, but I just think overall maybe not quite. There will be stronger performances, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And this is the thing too, and you're the same. Being here in Australia, we don't get most Oscar nominated films until after the New Year. So there's, there's plenty and ones that have been in the conversation and now dropped out, like Spencer, for example. I think we only just got last week.
So that's dropped out, has it?
My understanding is that there's not really any Oscar buzz around that anymore, but
the whole award season is just crazy, I reckon.
It is crazy. People forget about movies that come out earlier in the year. It's ridiculous.
I remember one year Wes Anderson had Grand Budapest Hotel, which I love. I think it's a great film. But it came out in March, and then the Oscars are obviously 12 months later. And it still got nominated for quite a lot, but at the time I was like, that is nearly unheard of. Most of the movies that are nominated are December releases.
Exactly. Movies that came out earlier in the year, which I loved, like The Green Knight and Pig.
Oh, I love The Green Knight.
See, they're not going to get any nominations just because people have forgotten about them, which is so sad.
See, on The Green Knight, I would say that The Green Knight and Nightmare Alley have probably my two favourite endings of the year. Yeah. Well, maybe not favourite, but the two strongest. Green Knight's favourite for sure, because I just think that's stunning. Yeah. Nightmare Alley, I wouldn't say it's my favourite ending, but I did watch it and go, holy shit, that is just fantastic. Well done by everybody. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely. That turn, and even though I saw it coming, it's still a fucking gut punch when you get, and the performance, the laughter, and the way he delivers that final line of, I was born for it. Yeah. It's wow. It hits you hard. Yeah, I read that scene in the script today, because the script's online if people want to read it.
Oh,
and
right.
They do that with some of the Oscar season sort of ones.
Yeah.
And just I can't remember the wording exactly, but the description of it by Del Toro and who was it? Kim, the co-writer. I can't remember.
Kim Morgan.
Yeah, Kim Morgan. It's just fantastic. It's just describes him hearing the description of the job from the guy and just they describe his face as just completely dissolving into 5 or 6 different things and breaking down. And it's kind of I'm imagining Bradley Cooper reading that, and he nailed it. He absolutely nailed it.
Yeah. I mean, you want to hear something scary? William Lindsay Gresham, who wrote the novel, which does end the same way, He actually also wrote a non-fiction book about carnivals. And that non-fiction book is the one that description of how you break a geek is from. That whole description of you pick them up and you offer them alcohol and tell them it's temporary. That was from the non-fiction book, which is like, that's scary that this is like, people used to go see this shit for fun.
Yeah, it is horrible. And that's part of it. Like, that's what I said before. Del Toro's normally gives you the horrible, but lifts you up with a bit of the hope. And there's just none of the hope. And, it hurts. And it's just that line, when the carnival boss says to him at the end, it's that key word he's got to hit where he says, it's temporary. And your stomach just sinks and you go, oh, God damn.
That's the thing. You know exactly what's happening, but you're right. It's that one word. That's the hit when you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
And he's been told the story. He knows what that means as well, and still has kind of dissolved as a man so much that he's just like, sign me up.
It's tragic.
Oh, so all in all, how are you scoring Nightmare Alley?
Oh man, I still feel kind of undecided, but I think out of 5, I'm probably sitting on a 3. I think large chunks of it disappointed me, and the direction and the pacing, and not Del Toro's direction, but just the direction of the story,
the direction of the narrative,
the narrative and the structure and things like that. I think were a bit of a letdown, particularly for a Del Toro film. It's normally very strong, and it was elevated a lot in my mind by a really superb finish.
Yeah,
but still, ultimately, I like a bit of hope in the world, and I probably will give it a 3.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. My gut reaction when walking out and I opened Letterboxd was to give this a 3, so 6 out of 10. I struggle with that because I do think there's a lot that's really, really good about it, but there is enough that didn't work for me that I think that's a fair score. I don't know, maybe I'll revisit it at some time and maybe I'll like it more, but to be honest, there's always the chance I'll like it less.
That's a worry. I did while watching it, I was like, will I watch this again? Probably not. This is not grabbing me. But then now I'm kind of like, I did come into it with a lot of baggage of like thinking Del Toro, it's going to be horror, it's going to be spooky, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. So now maybe I need to go back to it a year from now and just enjoy it for what it is, which is a bit of a visual treat.
Yeah. It's cool to hear too, though, that you're the same as me in that you like to just read screenplays. I do that all the time. Just one of my favorites, which really shocks me, is American Pie. If you've ever read the original screenplay for that,
I haven't.
It's so tightly written. It's it's crazy. Yeah.
It's a great thing to do after you watch a movie. Just to be like to break down how they took it from that and what we ended up with. And also just if you have that film sort of mind and you go, how would I have done that sort of thing?
Yeah.
They're a cool resource. And there's so many available out there. It's awesome to do.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining me, man. This has been awesome.
Pleasure.
I love talking film with people and you're an amazing person to talk film with. Can you tell everybody where they can find all the shows you do and how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can find my shows anywhere podcasts are at, really. So I do Scaredy Boys, which has new episodes every Friday, and it's just a horror podcast where 3 cowards force themselves to watch horror movies. And then the other one I do is just called How Good's Footy, which is for Australian football fans. It's a little bit looser than Scaredy Boys, and it's actually just a crazy podcast where we watch footy and get angry, and it's good fun. But yeah, you can find them anywhere, and I'm on Twitter at Carney from 55, and you can find my film reviews on Letterboxd. I'm at Carney Sean.
Yeah, I mean, both shows are awesome, and as I said to you before we started recording, Movie Maintenance, I think, is one of the all-time great podcasts, but Scaredy Boys is a hell of a lot of fun, and you're just embarking on the Year of Fear, which you kicked off with Muppets Haunted Mansion, which I thought was hilarious.
Yes, we did hint that we were finally going to do Midsummer. I should point out, I don't think Midsummer is actually going to be that scary. It's just it's just become one of these ones we've avoided.
Yeah,
we are cowards. I'm scared of that. I'm scared of Hereditary. I'm scared of everything. But yeah. We did go back through our previous 2 seasons and go, we start really strong. We watch a lot of spooky movies. And then I think we just give ourselves a few too many treats. Yeah. Too many of like the comedy horror movies and things like that. So this year we have pledged to do some very, very scary films. So,
I will say, I don't think Midsommar is it's definitely less scary than Hereditary. You could handle it. You could do it.
I think I can. It's built up in my mind. I'm just afraid.
Well, man, thanks again for joining me, and I highly recommend that everybody out there check out all of the shows that you are on, as well as everything else on Sanspants. They're all just a great time. Next week, I will be joined by my wife, Misk, again. We've got a patron request for a very special movie, Mean Girls. Are you a fan of Mean Girls, Carney?
It's a good film. That's another tight script.
It's a very tight script. Honestly, Tina Fey's best work, and I'm a big fan.
She's great.
In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with me, you can go to rewatchthething.com or rewatchthething@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all under the handle @rewatchthething. If you want to help support the show, you can go to patreon.com/rewatchthething, and I'll catch you next week. You're still here? The show's over. Go home. Go. But if you can't get enough of We Watched a Thing, why don't you check out our Patreon page? There's tons of behind-the-scenes content, heaps of bonus episodes. You can get full, unedited videos of each episode recording. You can pick a movie for me to do on the show, or even come and join me while I talk about it. So why don't you head over to patreon.com/We Watched a Thing. Go watch a movie.